I know there's a 2 in the title, but are the devs certain that's the direction they went in? The first Nioh was a game based around an unfinished Akira Kurosawa movie script that Koei Tecmo bought the rights to, and then set about scribbling into the margins a story about demons and magic crystals. Because there was no way Kurosawa pinned those details into his original script. Historical butchering aside, they still made a pretty competent Souls-like game, then proceeded to release quite a bit of DLC for it over the next few years, and I get the feeling they wanted to keep making DLC, because Nioh 2 feels identical to Nioh 1. A paraplegic would have no problem counting the amount of changes to the game on his fingers. The combat has precisely one new addition, using attacks you receive from fallen enemies, lifted straight from the senior years of the Castlevania series. Then you have the menus, which are identical to the first games, and most of the enemies are from the first game and its DLC. Regardless, Nioh 2 is still a pretty good Souls-like. It's just disappointing that the devs settled on the path of, if it ain't broken, don't make it any better. And in 2020, I don't feel this game holds up as well as a game released in 2017.
Once upon a time.
Being hit over the head with the Once Upon a Time opening is tiresome enough in Western fiction. When I hear zither music and Japanese flutes in the background, I feel like I'm being set up for a cruel joke by the localization team.
With this mysterious blade, the invincible demon was cut down at last.
Nioh 1 was a retelling of the real-life story of William, an Irishman who wound up shipwrecked in feudal Japan, instantly mastered the skills of the samurai, proceeded to kill giant monsters, win wars, and finally go out with a sexy ninja, making him the world's first and most successful weeb. This game is about a magic sword that destroys evil and a half-human, half-yokai protagonist that just does whatever someone tells him to do. Since there were no more Kurosawa scripts lying around to bastardize, I suppose Team Ninja had to recycle the plot of Ninja Gaiden. The dead parent cliché is on full display. What's worse is that the main character Hide doesn't even seem to care about his own backstory. His mother was murdered in front of his eyes, and he never followed up on that in the following years.
Open the door! Open the door!
It should be pointed out that this game can and probably should be played entirely in Japanese. Unlike in the first game, where characters would speak their native language, for the sequel they decided to localize it by leaning very heavily on the English language option. A little too heavily. Feudal Japan could be confused for England based on these casting decisions. Normally, a series might start off with a mute main character for the first game, and then give him the ability to speak in the sequel once the first game sells well and gets a bigger budget. Nioh 2 took the opposite path, starting with a voice character, then pivoting to a mute for the sequel. After Hide's mother was killed and he was granted immortality by the piece of the magic sword she gave to him just before dying at the hands of Kashin Koji, Hide has apparently been living by himself in a hut for many years, finding work as a yokai hunter. I've seen plenty of auspicious beginnings, but you kinda have to start the main character off not as a master demon slayer and work up to it. Hide would have continued doing nothing important if Tokichiro didn't randomly decide to make him his partner tonight.
I've been waiting for you. You, read the letter, right?
Rather than meet in person inside Hide's hut, Tokichiro stuck a note through the window while Hide was distracted, telling him to meet in a different location, and it just so happens the path there is filled with yokai. There was no reason why Tokichiro couldn't have greeted Hide at his hut since he was already there to deliver the letter.
I'm Tokichiro. And you are? Hide.
That counts as a greeting. Pulling out a weapon, especially in feudal Japan, is bound to create some dangerous miscommunication.
What'll it be? Come on, you got no place to be. Tag along.
Tokichiro tells Hide to follow him and be buddies with him. I'm not sure what Hide gets out of this relationship. It seems more like Tokichiro needed someone to do all the real work while he sat back and made things more difficult by signing Hide up for every single problem they encounter. And the game expects me to see this as a wonderful friendship.
But I do require your services, nonetheless.
Without a Kurosawa script to crib from, the devs couldn't write a coherent plot to save their lives. This often feels more like the disjointed plot of a fighting game, with new characters appearing minus an introduction or development, and we are just supposed to know who they are and why they are important because obviously all of us have degrees in Japanese history, and before you can even get to know the new character, the screen fades to black, some text appears on screen that tells you all about what this person wants you to do, and then you are thrown into a new level to fight yokai with no idea what you were doing until the end of that level when you get a new cutscene. Half of your motivation is found in the loading screen text.
Join us. Or where that came from.
What is this pocket change?
Mumyo has a proper reaction to Tokichiro's offer, though Hide should show at least a little bit of anger over Tokichiro not paying him anything for doing the same job. Sometimes, putting breasts on something seems more like a curse than a blessing. Take the snake women yokai found beneath Dosen's castle. They have to crawl on their stomach to go anywhere, dragging uncovered boobs, which, let's be honest, are kind of useless on a snake, over jagged rocks. Horniness shouldn't always override good character design, just most of the time. Dosen fled into the caverns beneath his castle once it was attacked by Yoshitatsu's forces. He even managed to reach this sealed tunnel which leads to a way out of the mountain. Instead of escaping, he comes back into the antechamber for no reason.
Who are you?
Were daggers almost the same as business cards in feudal Japan? Turns out Dosen is Hide's father. He was the former yokai slayer who wielded the magic sword, which he shattered after meeting a yokai woman and marrying her. Maybe you're wondering why I'm dryly detailing this information. That's because the moment is just as dry in the game. Hide finds out who his father is and has no reaction. He has never cared for anything because he has no actual character. If you're going to use a silent protagonist, you cannot expect moments like this to have much impact. Dosen could have joined Hide in the tunnel and escaped. If the snake boss couldn't get through it, I doubt the soldier yokai can. Instead, he sacrifices himself to the dead parent cliché. That door can be opened from the other side. Dosen opened it from that side when he re-entered the antechamber. For some reason, Hide can't open it. If you have an explanation for how Tokichiro is down here inside the secret escape tunnel under the mountain and on the other side of the castle from where we left him, I would love to hear it. And now Mumyo is down here too. Also with no explanation after refusing Tokichiro's offer to work with him earlier. Mumyo kills 2 yokai and somehow that saves Hide and Tokichiro. They were being swarmed from 4 directions by yokai just a second ago. According to the mission briefing, Tokichiro wants to follow Dosen's final words and travel to Owari. Hide was the only one present to hear Dosen say that, and Hide doesn't speak. So how does Tokichiro know about Owari?
How did my father meet his end? Was his death worthy of a viper?
Nobunaga is married to Dosen's daughter, making her Hide's half-sister, and Nobunaga his brother-in-law. This fact will never be relevant to the story in any way or brought up. Our protagonist cares nothing for any story revelation relating to him.
Penny, do you know what this means?
Not really. The game is doing a shoddy job of explaining who anyone is. All I know is that he was clearly bad since he had black teeth and there were dead soldiers strewn around him when I walked in.
Cold as ice, that one.
Get it? Because she uses ice to attack you in the first game.
I hear you have aided my brother.
I can't recall characters later if the game doesn't bother developing them at all while introducing them. Lady Oichi is Nobunaga's sister. That's all the game gives you. I've heard of hand-waving away characters you have no idea how to use, but hand-waving them into the plot is new. You can call him a yokai if you want, but that is clearly Aquaman.
You must be Kuroku. I've been looking for you.
Tokichiro wants to build a castle in one day to gain favor with Nobunaga. To do that, he needs the help of yokai like Kuroku and the Kamatachi. As always, Tokichiro offers them nothing for their help and they just go along with it. Hide just fought and killed that Kamatachi and took its soul for himself, but there it be once the cutscene starts. Tokichiro can calm a yokai down with a spirit stone, but he didn't do that when Kamatachi appeared. Hide had to fight it first.
Didn't I tell you, Mumyo? This is victory Tokichiro style. No killing required.
Except that I just made my way through a fortress killing every yokai and human I came across.
I must ask you to leave.
At least this time Tokichiro did something for the person he wants help from, by using a spirit stone to ease Hanbei's sickness for a time so he can help them storm Yoshitatsu's castle. Not that the storming of the castle will ever be seen or how Hanbei helped them do it, because the mission is the same as always. Hide does the entire thing alone by slogging his way through enemies toward the goal while the game explains there is a battle happening somewhere off screen. Saito Yoshitatsu is the man who had Dosen killed. He's also Hide's half-brother. So this fight should have a bit more setup and relevance since Hide is taking revenge on his father's killer. But that would take effort with the writing, so this is just a boss fight where the two never acknowledge one another, or create any emotional stakes. Not only was Yoshitatsu responsible for Hide's father dying, he was also being possessed by Kashin Koji, the guy who murdered Hide's mother and then killed Hide the first time. And there's still not even a hint of emotional buildup for all this.
What's with the long face?
This guy naturally produces Botox. That face doesn't move. Never has there been a more clear-cut case of leaving the Japanese voice actor's performance in the English localization than when Nobunaga starts singing.
We want to mix elements from both our names and be known as Yoshihide. 2 people, 1 name.
Very well.
Really?
But your name shall be Hideyoshi.
Wouldn't that get very confusing if the two of you combine names and both go by it?
You remind me, Nioh Guardians.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a title, and that's the exact same way Nioh 1 name-dropped the title as well. This is supposed to be a rearguard action to buy time for the main force to retreat to safety. A rearguard action against an army takes more than 4 people, so the setup for this level already makes no sense. But then the level itself has nothing to do with a rearguard action. With Hide fighting his way through a forest, then a giant yokai owl appears, and this all turns out to be where Mumyo and her clan of yokai hunters come from, and she just never bothered mentioning that until now. This story has spanned over a decade already, and the entire story is spread out over 50 years. And in that time, Mumyo never ages a day. Hide is half yokai, so at least he has an excuse. But Mumyo is simply the devs being lazy or not wanting their female lead to look old. I never encountered an explanation in the game, and no one ever reacts to her not aging. But internet searches indicate she is also immortal due to possessing the hand guard of the Sohayamaru. But then the game also states that only yokai can become immortal by holding it.
The Sahaya found me as a child.
They raised me as their own.
Mumyo's backstory is incredibly similar to that of the ninja lady from the first game, a runaway that was found and trained by a group of warriors, ninjas in the first game, yokai hunters here.
Ha. So he sent his underling. Delightful.
Who needs to define a character and why he's enemy when you can just expect the player to read up on Japanese history? That's why we're here in this castle fighting a guy who married Nobunaga's sister and is bad now, and I have no idea who he is or why I should care. Normally I wouldn't give out a sin for difficulty in a game you go into expecting difficult fights, but for this fight, I'm making an exception. How many daimyos does Kashin Koji have to possess before he is considered a problem?
You don't have a clue how I feel, do you, Hide?
You can't have a scene like this with a mute. Tokichiro doesn't have a clue how Hide feels either, because I sure as hell don't, and Tokichiro has been nothing but an optimist this entire time. You need to show me what's brought about this shift in tone in his character.
We are all born into this world, and we must all one day leave it.
An acceptable view on life and death. But Nobunaga is telling this to a person who hasn't aged a day during the 20 years he's known him, and by all accounts is immortal, always returning to life after dying, and his friend Mumyo is much the same. Meeting people like that is going to make you rethink your philosophy. The bigger a boss is in a Souls-like game, the more janky it tends to be unless it's handled carefully. Yuki is not one of them.
It's just... a surprise attack feels wrong.
I have granted you the power to realize your destiny.
You're not even going to question Toshimitsu's glowing red eyes, huh? Tokichiro sided with Toshimitsu in turning against Nobunaga with a surprise attack on his temple retreat. Yet Tokichiro also sends Hide and Mumyo a letter telling them about the surprise attack so they could arrive and possibly stop it.
Yasuke, the enemy is not to lay hands on my remains.
If Yasuke could escape and even retrieve the remains, what is stopping Nobunaga and his wife from leaving as well? Toshimitsu and Mitsuhide have already withdrawn. Cat car girls.
Yet within you, I sense a power greater than that of any human.
Lady Oichi is surprisingly kind to the man who fought her husband to the death.
The Hideyoshi army is relentless. Our left flank has collapsed.
That wretched monkey.
Toshimitsu is the one who gave Tokichiro power. Now Tokichiro's army is bearing down on Mitsuhide and Toshimitsu shortly after they killed Nobunaga. There was zero build-up to Tokichiro's treachery, and zero build-up to his double cross either. Every person Kashin Koji has possessed or transformed into a yokai has died afterward, Toshimitsu being the only exception. Of course, Tokichiro kills him himself right after he returns to his senses, but one dude straight up melted after the possession ended.
Protect Lord Mitsuhide.
Toshimitsu uses his dying breath to tell Hide to protect Mitsuhide, the other guy who helped kill Nobunaga, and Hide just does it despite the fact that he served Nobunaga. Mitsuhide isn't even absolved of his betrayal by a possession by Kashin Koji. He chose to go through with that based on his beliefs. When you refuse to speak, I suppose faking an execution to cut off a man's top knot is the only way to get your message of mercy across. Try stuffing a cat down your shirt and see if it plays along with being a pocket watch.
Please look after my wife.
This makes twice Hide has killed Lady Oichi's husband in combat, and each time they both begged him to protect her in their stead. You had one job, Hide. He even stopped mid-stride so she could finish after she pulled out a dagger.
The home provinces and Hokuriku are as good as his. Now his men march on Kishu, Shikoku, and Tokai.
What exactly is Tokichiro doing that is so different from Nobunaga? It was perfectly fine when Nobunaga was waging war in his attempt to unify Japan, but now that Tokichiro has taken up the mantle of doing that, he's suddenly the great threat that has to be stopped. Mitsuhide, now calling himself Tenkai and living as a monk, even serves Lord Ieyasu, the man who finally unifies all of Japan through war in the first game. This could have been an emotional moment had they not made Hide a silent character. Instead, it falls flat because their friendship over decades is one-dimensional and completely based on Tokichiro. I couldn't honestly tell you if Hide even thought of him as a friend since there was no interaction. Previously, Kashin Koji disposed of any human vessel that was defeated. However, Tokichiro he decides to bring back to life and possess to continue his war of conquest. And Tokichiro later in life launches 2 failed invasions of Korea, major events not covered in this game. I guess those failures can now be pinned on Kashin Koji. The next level is a repeat of the previous level, only in reverse. The Blood Moon, or whatever, causes all the friendly yokai to go bad, including Kuroku. It has no effect on Hide, who is half yokai, and went berserk at the beginning of the game. Just like the last giant boss, the bigger it is, the less enjoyable it is to fight compared to other bosses in the game. Tokichiro stabs Hide with a Sohayamaru dagger, which you would think could give Hide a true death that he can't revive from since it's designed to kill yokai, but Hide will end up reviving from it anyway.
Finally, I have waited so long. Haven't you grown big and strong?
Hide's mom is here in limbo to see him. Not that it affects Hide or anything. There's a good reason why Dark Souls keeps all of its characters enigmatic with no connection to the player character. It's to avoid scenes like this where the silent main character can't emote properly.
After you fell, Tokichiro continued gathering spirit stones from all over the land. Now, he has succeeded in uniting and ruling over Japan. There may be a way to stop him, but you must go to Byodoin in the capital.
So Tokichiro has brought peace and stability to Japan after killing Hide, and we want to stop him and throw the country into another period of war. Why?
Otakemaru's spirit has been sealed in Byodoin. But the demon's twisted spirit took a new form, as a red-eyed man. He possessed people's hearts and plunged our land into war and strife.
It turns out Kashin Koji is actually a yokai named Otakimaru, whom the Sohayamaru sword was originally forged to slay, which does explain why he killed Hide and his mom years ago. It doesn't explain why he threw the dagger piece of it on the ground after killing Hide again. Without that sword, he can't be stopped, so it would have been in his best interest to take it and hide it away somewhere.
It is said that the secrets of this sword are to be found in Byodoin. This is the same temple where Otakimaru was once sealed away.
That is incredibly convenient.
It's been a while. Glad to see we're both still breathing.
Hide returns to the world of the living 6 years after his death, even though all he did while dead was talk with his mom. Is there a reason he couldn't have returned sooner to prevent Tokichiro from gaining absolute power over the country? Shouldn't Hide's body have rotted where it was left on the battlefield years ago? And how did he get all of his equipment back like the Sohayamaru? And Mumyo doesn't even react to Hide returning to life after all these years. Tokichiro is now 50 years old. The game has so far spanned 35 years, meaning Tokichiro was only 15 when he first met Hide. This does not look like a 15-year-old.
You're alive. Well.
Tokichiro seems surprised by that, which makes it weird that he was here in Byodoin seemingly waiting for him to show up. Tokichiro frees two ancient, powerful yokai, which would have been a pretty good suck on that moment, except one of them runs off to be the boss of a Nioh 1 DLC instead, while the other is a pretty easy boss fight, which is honestly starting to become an issue. The bosses in the second half of the game barely gave me any trouble.
Here, I want you to have it. And now, you'll need spirit stones.
Why did we even come to Byodoin if there was nothing here we didn't already know?
Let me introduce you to my new bride.
The madman wifed a castle. Add another unfun, large, jank boss fight to the list. Rather than use his yokai sling sword to kill every yokai he encounters from here on out, it's only pulled out during cutscenes. I have no idea who this woman is. Apparently you can meet her in a side mission, but I never did that mission. And she's abruptly dropped into the main plot with no introduction, and helps Hide and Mumyo get inside Daigo Temple where Tokichiro is. Though upon rewatching the scene, she didn't really help them get inside at all. She just gives them an entrance performance which is completely unnecessary. Tokichiro controls an army of yokai, so he had to know the female courtesans around him were snake women, meaning Tokichiro is awoken to a weird fetish. Then again, this is the same guy who married a castle.
You've seen these cherry trees in full bloom before. Have you not? They're the perfect spot for your grave.
After killing Hide once and now facing him again years later, you would think there would be some second guessing on whether that's even possible in Tokichiro's mind. Cutting Tokichiro's horns off instead of stabbing him ends Otakimaru's control over Tokichiro, and he goes right back to being a friendly guy, absolving him of any responsibility for his actions. Except Tokichiro started going bad well before Otakimaru possessed him. That only happened after Hide killed Tokichiro the first time.
So that is what broke me. The light of the Sohaya.
Otakimaru in his Kashin Koji form should just do his normal trick of vanishing after his host is defeated, then find someone new to control. Instead, he decides to fight Hide now that Hide has a Sohayumaru, the one weapon that can stop him. Instead of all the other times he could have fought him before Hide ever got the sword and would have stood no chance against him. That should be the end of the game. Otakimaru is defeated and sealed in Byodoin once again, even though Hide has to remain there as part of the seal. But Nioh 2 decides to make things confusing by tying this prequel game in with the first game's DLC story, and by doing so, makes this game's finale feel like something that should have been a DLC itself. Years later, a female Spanish spy somehow breaks the seal in Otakimaru's resting place, releasing him again and waking up Hide. William is here to stop her but decides to grab Hide first, someone he has never met and should know nothing about. Then Hide and William fight for fanservice reasons with no conclusive winner. Mumyo must have hung around this place for 18 years while Hide was asleep, waiting for some contrived event to happen that would wake him up. The final level, Byodoin, is another repeated level but done in reverse. I have no idea who Maria is since I never played Nioh's DLC, but she plans to revive Tokichiro to help Spain wage war against England. I don't see where she got the idea that Tokichiro will somehow help Spain win a naval battle against England. All of his battles were on land. Tokichiro's body is immaculately preserved for an 18-year-old corpse. Otakimaru tries to possess the newly reanimated Tokichiro even though that vessel failed him years ago, but Hide jumps in the way and is possessed instead, which he had already briefly been possessed by when William woke him up. That's why they fought. This time though, it takes a big internal fight between Hide and Otakimaru to finish it. Doesn't Hide need to reseal Otakimaru in the sealed chamber below and go back to sleep? Apparently not this time. Looks like the game is already DLC baiting us with these visions of previous wielders of Sohayumaru.
So you made it too?
But isn't Hideyoshi a traitor and a...
Looks like you're off the mark.
Glad that's taken care of. What was her name again?
What was it like being a yokai? Have you fully recovered?
You'd be better off asking Hide. Right, Hide?
Except that Hide doesn't talk.
My life came like dew, disappears like dew.
You too could come up with a touching haiku about your life if you had to die 3 times before it stuck.